Now, so the issues that would be more important would be what Shabir has called genocide. And yesterday he said, I called it genocide. I don't call it genocide. And there's actually a problem here. There's actually a problem here with Shabir's interpretation of these texts. Now, Shabir says that these passages in the Old Testament are calling for genocide. And I will grant that if you read the passage without the surrounding text, that you might come to that conclusion, because that's what it sounds like it's calling for. It sounds like it's saying completely wipe everyone out, completely destroy everyone. That's what the text sounds like it's saying. If you read the rest of the text, you will see it can't possibly mean that. I don't mean I'm interpreting it differently. I mean it can't possibly mean what Shabir says it means. So these texts that call, he pointed to texts in Deuteronomy, for instance, which call for completely wiping people out. Side by side with these texts, in fact, far more common are commands to drive them out and claims that God will drive them out before you. Now, how are these two reconcilable? One, think of the two commands. One, go and wipe everyone out. Leave alive nothing that breathes. And in the same text you would find, drive them out before you. What's going on there? We would look at those as complete contradictions, not in the ancient Near East. So let me give you an example. In Exodus 23:23, God says to the Israelites, my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. So they're going to be completely destroyed, right? They're destroyed and there's going to be nothing left, according to that text. Later, in the same chapter, God explains what he means. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out before you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. So what's going on here? God says he's going to drive them out little by little, and yet he says he's going to destroy them. Those sound like completely different things to us. Not in the ancient Near East. I'll give you another example of the problem here. All the groups that are said to be destroyed appear later on in the text. If they're destroyed, if they're wiped out, if nothing has been left alive, how do these groups all appear later in the text? So for instance, so we have the commands to go and slaughter everyone in the book of Deuteronomy and Exodus and so on, side by side with passages saying that God's going to drive them out. And then in the book of Joshua, Joshua goes city by city, and it says that he completely does what the Lord says. He completely wipes them out, nothing left alive. And then we have everything summed up for us in Joshua 11:23. So Joshua took the entire land just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions, and the land had rest from war. So everything's done. Joshua had done what God commanded him. That would mean wipe everything out, if that's what the text means, right? Why do we read in the very next book, first verse, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites? I thought Joshua had already wiped out the Canaanites in accordance with everything the Lord commanded him. And then the first verse, right after his death, who's going to fight the Canaanites for us? This should be telling you something is going on. They're using language in a way that we don't. If drive people out of the land is used side by side with utterly destroy them, that should be the first clue. And when the groups that are said to be killed and destroyed are around later in the text, that should be the second clue. And we find the same thing with the issue of the Amalekites. So here's a passage. Saul is ordered, 1 Samuel 15:3, now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has and do not spare him, but put to death both men and women, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So kill everything, right? And then it says, Saul did it, except he kept the king alive. So everyone is dead. All the Amalekites are dead except the king. And then Samuel kills the king. So now there are no more Amalekites, if that's what the text means. Later in the same book, 1 Samuel 27:8-9. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites and the Girzites and the Amalekites. How are the Amalekites there? They were supposedly completely exterminated. The Amalekites show up again in 1 Samuel 30. Centuries later, they're still there during the reign of Hezekiah in 1 Chronicles 4. Still more centuries later, the main enemy of the Jews in the book of Esther is Haman, a descendant of King Agag, the king who was supposedly the last living Amalekite. What's going on with the text? Well, we happen to know exactly what's going on with the text because we can compare it with other ancient Near Eastern sources. And when we do that, we find that this is a literary device. If you conquered someone else's army, you use bragging rights of complete annihilation of them. This was meant to intimidate This was meant to boast and brag about your God and so on, and it's a common literary device. We do something slightly similar. If your football team wins, you don't say, we scored way more points than them. You say, we massacred them, we slaughtered them, we butchered them, and you didn't do any of that literally. That's how we talk. They just took it to another level. And notice, it has to be that, unless you think the authors are completely insane, and that they don't realize, hey, once I've said in my text that this group has been completely exterminated, I obviously can't have them showing up later in the text. So they're either insane or they're using a literary device, but we know it's a literary device. Zaini Zevit, professor of biblical literature at Northwestern Semitic languages, says when the composition and rhetoric of the Joshua narratives in chapters 9 through 12 are compared to the conventions of writing and conquest in Egyptian, Hittite, Akkadian, Moabite, and Aramaic texts, they're revealed to be very similar. And we find this from many others. We know what's going on here. It's called hagiographic hyperbole. You don't say, I beat them. You say, I completely slaughtered them and left nothing left alive. So, there is violence, there is an invasion, there is fighting, but it's not the genocide that Shabir calls for. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there later in the text.